Howdy everyone, I'm Nightmare USA, and today we're going to be diving into 5 of the most terrifying true horror stories to ever come out of the United States. These aren't campfire tales or works of fiction. These are real events that happened to real people, leaving behind a legacy of fear and unanswered questions. From the idyllic suburbs to the lonely backroads, darkness can be found in the most unexpected places. The stories we're about to explore are a chilling reminder that sometimes the most frightening monsters are the ones that walk among us, and the most horrifying mysteries are the ones that remain unsolved. So, I invite you to turn down the lights, get comfortable, and prepare yourself. We're about to count down 5 stories that will make you question the safety of your own home and look over your shoulder the next time you're alone. Each one is more unsettling than the last, a journey into the heart of American horror. These are the tales that have baffled investigators, terrified communities, and become modern-day legends, not because they're made up, but because they actually happened. As we go through these accounts, I want you to put yourself in the shoes of the people who lived them. Imagine the creeping dread, the paralyzing fear, and the cold realization that something is terribly, terribly wrong. From a stalker who watches from the shadows to a crime so brutal it haunts a town a century later, these are the stories that prove the truth is often far more terrifying than fiction. So if you're ready, let's get into it. Our first story takes us to the picturesque town of Westfield, New Jersey. In 2014, Derek and Maria Broaddus thought they had found their dream home. It was a beautiful 6-bedroom house at 657 Boulevard, the perfect place to raise their 3 young children. They were overjoyed, eagerly planning renovations and imagining the happy life they would build within those walls. They were completely unaware that someone else was already watching them, someone with a vested and deeply disturbing interest in their new home. Just 3 days after closing on the house, before they had even moved in, Derek went to check the mail. Tucked among the bills and junk mail was a thick white cardstock envelope. There was no return address. It was addressed simply to the new owner. Curious, Derek opened it. The letter inside was typed, and the words he read sent a chill down his spine. It began warmly enough. "Dearest new neighbor at 657 Boulevard, allow me to welcome you to the neighborhood." But the tone quickly shifted into something sinister. The writer claimed that their family had been watching the house for generations. "My grandfather watched the house in the 1920s and my father watched in the 1960s. It is now my time," the letter stated. The writer, who signed off only as the watcher, seemed to know intimate details about the Broaddus family. The letter asked, "Do you need to fill the house with the young blood I requested? Better for me, was your old house too small for the growing family, or was it greed to bring me your children? Once I know their names, I will call to them and draw them to me." Derek was horrified. The watcher knew he had children. He knew how many. The letter continued with even more terrifying specifics. "I see already that you have flooded 657 Boulevard with contractors so that you can destroy the house as it was supposed to be. Tisk, tisk, a bad move. You don't want to make 657 Boulevard unhappy." The letter was a direct threat, a violation of the safety and security they thought they had just purchased. They immediately contacted the police, who advised them not to tell anyone, especially their new neighbors, as any of them could be the suspect. A few weeks later, another letter arrived. This one was even more personal and terrifying. The watcher now referred to their children by their nicknames and knew their birth order. The letter asked, "Have they found out what is in the walls yet? In time they will." It spoke of the house's secrets, its very soul. The house is crying from the pain it is in. You have changed it and made it so fancy. You are stealing its history. It cries for the young blood it needs. It needs you to bring it to it. Who am I? I am the watcher and have been in control of 657 Boulevard for the better part of 2 decades now. The Broaddus family was living in a state of constant terror. They hadn't even moved in, yet their lives were consumed by this anonymous tormentor. They stopped bringing their children to the house, terrified of what the watcher might do. The renovations halted. Their dream had become a waking nightmare. They hired a private investigator, a former FBI agent, who looked into every neighbor, every previous owner, but found nothing concrete. The police investigation also hit a wall. A 3rd letter arrived, this one more direct and menacing than the others. "Where have you gone to?" it demanded. 657 Boulevard is missing you." The family had, by this point, decided they could never live in that house. The psychological toll was too great. The dream was dead, replaced by a gnawing fear that followed them everywhere. They were trapped, paying a mortgage and taxes on a house they were too afraid to occupy. They tried to sell the house, But the story of the Watcher had become local legend. They were legally obligated to disclose the letters to any potential buyers, and understandably, no one wanted to purchase a home that came with its own dedicated, anonymous stalker. They even tried to get permission from the town to tear down the house and build 2 smaller ones, hoping to erase the stigma, but the planning board denied their request. The investigation into the Watcher's identity has been extensive. DNA was found on one of the envelopes, but it didn't match anyone in the police database or any of the neighbors who voluntarily submitted samples. Theories ranged from a jealous neighbor who was outbid on the house, to a disgruntled former servant, to a mentally disturbed individual living nearby. But every lead went cold. The identity of the Watcher remains a complete mystery. Ultimately, the Broaddus family sold the house in 2019 at a significant financial loss. They never lived a single day at 657 Boulevard. The letters stopped after they sold the property, leaving behind a chilling legacy. Who was this person who claimed a generational right to watch the house? Were they still there, in the quiet, affluent neighborhood of Westfield, waiting for the next family? The story of the Watcher house is a terrifying reminder that you can lock your doors and windows, but you can't always protect yourself from a threat that comes in the mail. It's a psychological horror story played out in real life, where the monster isn't under the bed, but is instead an unseen presence, watching, waiting, and writing from just beyond the edge of your property line. The new owners have not reported receiving any letters. For now, the Watcher is silent. Let's travel north to the cold, desolate roads of New Hampshire. This is where our second story begins, a mystery that has captivated and baffled armchair detectives and law enforcement for nearly 2 decades. On February 9th, 2004, a 21-year-old nursing student named Maura Murray packed a bag, emptied her bank account, lied to her professors and her job about a death in the family, and drove away from her dorm at the University of Massachusetts Amherst. She was never seen again. Maura was a bright, athletic young woman, a West Point cadet before transferring to UMass. But in the days leading up to her disappearance, her behavior was erratic. She had a minor car accident. She had an emotional breakdown at work. The email she sent to her professors about a family emergency was a lie. There was no death in the family. She packed textbooks, birth control pills, and clothes, but left many of her belongings packed up in boxes in her dorm room as if she was in the middle of moving out. She drove north in her black 1996 Saturn sedan. Her destination was unknown. She had looked up directions to Burlington, Vermont, but she never made it there. Around 7:30 p.m., on a sharp, dark corner of Route 112 in Haverhill, New Hampshire, Maura crashed her car into a snowbank. A local school bus driver named Butch Atwood was driving home when he came upon the scene. He pulled over and asked the young woman, Maura, if she needed him to call the police. She was reportedly shaken, but not visibly injured. She pleaded with him not to call the police, claiming she had already called for roadside assistance, which was another lie, as cell service was practically non-existent in that area. Butch, feeling uneasy about the situation but respecting her wishes, continued home and called the police anyway. He lived only about 100 yards from the crash site. By the time the first police officer arrived on the scene, less than 10 minutes later, Maura Murray was gone. The car was locked. Inside, police found her belongings, including an open bottle of alcohol and a box of wine. A damaged credit card and blank accident report forms were also found. Outside the car, in the snow, there were footprints, but they led a short distance down the road and then simply stopped, as if she had vanished into thin air. There was no sign of a struggle, no blood, nothing to indicate foul play at the scene itself. An extensive search began immediately. Police, search and rescue teams, and volunteers scoured the woods and surrounding area. Helicopters with thermal imaging cameras flew overhead. They found nothing. Not a single clue. Not a footprint off the road. Not a piece of clothing. Not a trace of Maura Murray. It was as if she had been erased from the face of the earth on that lonely stretch of highway. The theories about what happened to Maura are numerous and deeply unsettling. One theory is that she simply ran away to start a new life. Her packed bags, the lie to her professors, and her desire to avoid the police could all point to a planned departure. Perhaps she arranged to be picked up by someone at the crash site, but her family insists she would never abandon them without a word. And if she did start a new life, she has remained a ghost for almost 20 years. Another, darker theory is that she succumbed to the elements. Perhaps she was disoriented from the crash, possibly intoxicated, and wandered into the dense, unforgiving woods of the White Mountains. In the freezing February temperatures, she wouldn't have survived for long, but again, extensive searches of the area have turned up absolutely nothing. It seems improbable that her body would not have been found after all this time. Then there is the theory of foul play. Did Maura accept a ride from the wrong person? Was another car on that road, someone who saw a vulnerable young woman and seized the opportunity? This would explain why she vanished so quickly and without a trace. Her father, Fred Murray, has long believed that a local individual was responsible, someone who knew the area and could have easily abducted her and hidden her car before police arrived. Over the years, numerous strange leads and potential sightings have emerged, but none have ever been substantiated. A man reported his brother acting strangely and making disturbing comments about Maura's disappearance. A cadaver dog got a hit in the closet of a nearby A-frame house, but a search of the basement turned up nothing. The case has become a vortex of online speculation, with every detail of Maura's life and the night she disappeared being dissected by thousands of people. The mystery of Maura Murray is a haunting puzzle with too many missing pieces. Was she a young woman running from a secret life who met with a tragic accident? Or was she the victim of a predator who happened upon her at her most vulnerable moment? All we know for sure is that on a cold winter's night, a young woman's car was found abandoned on a dark road, and the driver was never heard from again, leaving behind only questions that echo in the chilling New Hampshire wind. For our third story, we must step back in time to the quiet, unassuming town of Villisca, Iowa, in the year 1912. This story is a chilling piece of American history, a crime so brutal and bizarre that it has remained unsolved for over a century, leaving a permanent scar on the town and birthing one of the most haunted locations in the country. It all began on the morning of June 10th, when a neighbor noticed that the home of the Moore family was unusually quiet. The Moore family was well known and respected in Villisca. Josiah Moore was a successful businessman, and he and his wife Sarah were raising 4 happy children, Herman, Catherine, Boyd, and Paul. That particular night, 2 young friends of the children, Lena and Ina Stillinger, were also staying over for a sleepover after attending a Children's Day program at the local church. The house was full, 8 people sleeping soundly in their beds, completely unaware of the evil that was about to descend. When the neighbor, Mary Peckham, saw that the house was still dark and silent late in the morning, and her calls went unanswered, she grew concerned. She called Josiah's brother, Ross Moore, who came over with a key. When he unlocked the door and stepped inside, he was met with a scene of unimaginable horror. In one of the downstairs bedrooms, he found the bodies of the 2 Stillinger girls. He immediately ran out, telling Mary to call the sheriff. What they would soon discover was that every single person in the house was dead. The entire Moore family, Josiah and Sarah in their bedroom and their 4 children in theirs, had all been brutally murdered in their sleep. The weapon, an axe belonging to Josiah, was found in the downstairs bedroom, with the Stillinger girls, still stained with blood. The killer, or killers, had moved methodically through the house, room by room, and bludgeoned each of the 8 victims in the head with the blunt end of the axe. The crime scene was deeply strange and unsettling, filled with bizarre details that have confounded investigators ever since. Every mirror and pane of glass in the house had been covered with clothing or cloths. A plate of uneaten food was found on the kitchen table, along with a bowl of bloody water, as if the killer had stopped to wash their hands. The bodies of the victims had been covered with bedsheets after they were killed. Strangest of all, the killer had locked the doors from the inside and taken the keys. They had also hung cloths over the windows, ensuring no one could see in from the outside. The attack was carried out with such brutal efficiency and stealth that no one in the tightly packed neighborhood heard a single scream. The town's doctor estimated that the murders likely took place sometime after midnight. The investigation that followed was chaotic and, by modern standards, completely botched. The crime scene was immediately contaminated, with hundreds of curious townspeople trampling through the house before it was properly secured. Souvenirs were even taken from the home. Despite this, a number of suspects emerged, but the evidence against any of them was purely circumstantial. One prominent suspect was a man named Frank F. Jones, a powerful Iowa state senator and Josiah Moore's former employer and business rival. Moore had left Jones's company to start his own, taking a very profitable account with him and creating a great deal of animosity. Some theorized that Jones hired a hitman, a man named William Mansfield, to carry out the murders. Mansfield was even indicted by a grand jury, but the case was later dropped due to a lack of evidence. Another suspect was a traveling minister named Reverend George Kelly. He was known to be mentally unstable and had attended the Children's Day program on the night of the murders, leaving town early the next morning. He later confessed to the crime, providing details that seemed to match the scene, but he recanted his confession, and after 2 separate trials, he was acquitted. His confession was deemed to have been coerced. Other theories pointed to a transient or a serial killer. Similar axe murders had occurred in nearby towns around the same time, leading some to believe it was the work of a single, roving madman, but no one was ever convicted. The case grew colder and colder, the leads drying up until nothing was left but speculation and local folklore. The murder weapon, the strange rituals at the scene, and the lack of a clear motive have turned the Villisca Axe murders into an enduring, terrifying mystery. Today, the house at 508 East 2nd Street still stands in Villisca. It has been restored to its 1912 condition and operates as a tourist attraction for those fascinated by dark history and the paranormal. Visitors can tour the house and even stay overnight, and many have reported experiencing chilling phenomena, disembodied children's voices, falling objects, and the overwhelming feeling of a dark, sorrowful presence. The house is a monument to an unsolved crime, a place where a family's American dream was extinguished in a single night of unimaginable violence by a phantom killer who was never brought to justice. Our 4th story isn't about a single event, but a terrifying pattern. It's a controversial theory that connects the deaths of dozens, perhaps hundreds of young men across the United States. It suggests that these deaths, officially ruled as accidental drownings or suicides, are actually the work of a sophisticated and organized group of serial killers. This is the theory of the smiley face killers. The pattern is disturbingly consistent. The victim is almost always a college-aged male, athletic, popular, and a good student. He goes out for a night of drinking with friends at a bar or a party. At some point during the night, he becomes separated from his group. He vanishes without a trace. Days, weeks, or even months later, his body is found in a nearby body of water, like a river, lake, or pond. The official cause of death is almost always listed as accidental drowning, often attributed to intoxication. The police conclude that the young man, drunk and disoriented, simply wandered off, fell into the water, and drowned. It's a tragic but plausible scenario. Case closed. But for a group of retired New York City detectives, this explanation didn't add up. The sheer number of similar cases was too much to be a coincidence. The detectives, led by Kevin Gannon and Anthony Duarte, began investigating these cases on their own. They traveled the country, re-examining evidence, talking to families, and visiting the locations where the bodies were found. They believed they uncovered a sinister connection. Near the locations where at least a dozen of the bodies were discovered, they found graffiti of a smiley face. Sometimes it was just a simple smiley. Other times it was more complex, but it was always there, like a cryptic calling card. This is where the theory gets its name. Gannon and his team believe this smiley face is the signature of a nationwide network of killers. They argue that the victims are targeted, abducted, held for a period of time, murdered, and then deliberately placed in the water to make the death look like an accident. They point to evidence that they say law enforcement has overlooked or dismissed. For example, many of the victims were found in water that was shallow or in areas that had already been extensively searched. The condition of the bodies often didn't align with the amount of time they were supposedly in the water. Some victims had strange injuries inconsistent with a simple fall. Furthermore, many of the victims' cell phones and wallets were missing, suggesting robbery was not the primary motive. The detectives also highlight the geographical clustering of the deaths. A significant number of cases have occurred along the I-94 corridor, stretching from the Midwest to the East Coast. They've identified clusters of deaths in cities like Chicago, Boston, and Minneapolis, all near bodies of water. The consistency of the victim profile, young, athletic, successful men, also points in their view to a deliberate selection process. The theory is highly controversial, and it's important to state that the FBI has publicly said they have found no evidence to support the existence of a smiley face gang. Many law enforcement officials and forensic experts maintain that the deaths are tragic accidents, plain and simple. They argue that the smiley face graffiti is common and its presence is likely a coincidence, a classic case of confirmation bias. Critics also point out that, sadly, young men drinking heavily and then accidentally drowning is not an uncommon occurrence. They argue that the detectives are seeing patterns where none exist, connecting unrelated tragedies to fit their narrative. They believe the theory offers a sensational explanation that gives false hope to grieving families who are desperate for answers, beyond a simple, tragic accident. Despite the official pushback, the theory persists and has gained a significant following. Gannon and his team have been featured on documentary series, and their investigation continues to attract believers. For the families of the victims, the theory offers a potential explanation for nagging questions and inconsistencies in the official reports. They can't accept that their responsible, capable sons would just drunkenly wander into a river. Whether the smiley face killers are a real, terrifying network operating in the shadows or simply a dark conspiracy theory born from a series of tragic coincidences, the core of the story is undeniably frightening. The idea that a predator, or a group of them, could be targeting young men, murdering them, and getting away with it by staging the deaths as accidents is a chilling thought. It turns a place of recreation, a riverbank or a lake, into a potential crime scene, and it leaves dozens of families with no closure, forever wondering what really happened to their sons on their last night alive. For our final and perhaps most famous story, we go to rural Robertson County, Tennessee, in the early 1800s. This is not a story of a human killer, but of a malevolent, unseen entity that tormented a family for years. It is one of America's greatest ghost stories, a tale so well documented and terrifying that even a future president, Andrew Jackson, was said to have encountered it. This is the legend of the Bell Witch. The story begins in 1817 on the farm of John Bell. He was a prosperous farmer, living with his wife, Lucy, and their children. The haunting started subtly. The family began hearing strange noises outside their log cabin at night, knocking on the doors and walls, the sound of chains being dragged, and a gulping, choking sound. At first, John Bell dismissed it as animals or pranksters, but the activity soon escalated and moved inside the house. The unseen entity began to torment the family physically. It would pull the covers off them as they slept, pinch them, and slap them. The youngest daughter, Betsy Bell, seemed to be the primary target of the entity's aggression. She would be violently slapped, her hair pulled, and she would complain of being stuck with invisible pins. The family was living in a constant state of fear and exhaustion, besieged by a force they could not see or understand. Soon, the entity developed a voice. At first it was faint whispers, but it grew into a clear, distinct voice that could be heard by everyone. It identified itself as Kate, the witch of the family. Kate claimed she was the spirit of a disgruntled former neighbor, Kate Batts, who believed John Bell had cheated her in a land deal. Whether this was true or just a name the entity adopted, it became known as the Bell Witch. The voice of Kate was relentless. It would curse, mock, and threaten the family, especially John Bell, whom it called Old Jack. It would sing hymns, quote scripture verbatim, and hold intelligent conversations with visitors who came to witness the strange phenomena. The fame of the haunting spread, and people traveled from all over to the Bell farm. Kate seemed to enjoy the attention, often putting on a show for the guests, revealing their secrets and engaging in witty and often vulgar banter. One of the most famous accounts involves General Andrew Jackson, who was not yet president at the time. Intrigued by the stories, he decided to visit the Bell farm with a group of his men to investigate. According to the legend, as his wagon approached the property, it suddenly stopped dead. The horses could not pull it, no matter how hard they were whipped. Jackson reportedly exclaimed, "By the eternal, boys, it's the witch." Then a disembodied female voice was heard saying she would let them pass, and the wagon moved again. The torment continued for years. John Bell's health began to decline rapidly. He suffered from seizures and facial paralysis, which the entity, Kate, took full credit for. She would torment him mercilessly during his fits, screaming with glee at his suffering. In December of 1820, John Bell fell into a coma and died. The family found a strange vial of liquid in the medicine cabinet. Kate's voice proudly proclaimed that she had given Old Jack a big dose of that which had finished him off. To test it, they gave a drop to the cat, which died instantly. After John Bell's death, the haunting began to subside. Kate also seemed to have a particular hatred for Betsy's engagement to a local man named Joshua Gardner. The entity tormented the couple relentlessly until Betsy finally broke off the engagement. Shortly after, in 1821, Kate's voice announced that she was leaving but would return in 7 years. True to her word, she reportedly returned in 1828 for a few weeks, haunting Lucy Bell and her sons before disappearing again. The legend of the Bell Witch has been passed down through generations. The primary source is a book written by Martin Van Buren Ingram in 1894 titled an authenticated history of the Bell Witch, which claims to be based on the diary of Richard Williams Bell, one of John's sons. While historians debate the absolute truth of the account, the story's impact is undeniable. It's a terrifying tale of a family systematically destroyed by a seemingly intelligent, malevolent, and powerful paranormal force. Was it a poltergeist, the vengeful spirit of Kate Batts, or a complex hoax perpetrated by the family? No one knows for sure. The Bell Witch story stands as a cornerstone of American folklore, a chilling account of a haunting so intense and so personal that it ended in death. It serves as a stark reminder that sometimes the greatest threats don't come from the living, but from something else entirely, something from the other side that whispers in the dark and seeks to do us harm. And that brings us to the end of our journey into some of the most terrifying true stories from the United States. From the unseen watcher in a quiet suburb to the legendary malice of the Bell Witch, these accounts show us that horror isn't confined to movie screens. It can be found in a letter in your mailbox, on a lonely stretch of road, or even within the walls of your own home. These stories linger because they are unresolved, leaving us with a chilling sense of unease and the knowledge that the world can be a far stranger and more dangerous place than we like to think. So tonight, when you hear a strange noise or get that feeling you're being watched, maybe don't be so quick to dismiss it. Do me a favor and double check that your doors and windows are locked. The stories we've heard are a powerful reminder to always be aware of your surroundings and to trust your instincts. The line between a normal day and a living nightmare can sometimes be terrifyingly thin, and it's always better to be cautious. Stay vigilant and stay safe. Now, I'm sure some of you watching have your own strange, dark, and mysterious stories to tell. The world is full of unexplained events and close calls. If you have a personal story or a local legend that has always creeped you out, I would love to hear about it. Please share it in the comments section below. I read as many as I can, and your story might even be featured in a future video. Thank you for joining me, and I'll see you in the next one.